Welcome back to the Monster Master Godzilla's Godzilla-Thon. We're now up to Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, this one is the third entry in the Monsterverse, which is the name of the cinematic universe, which consisting of Godzilla, Kong, and all the famous Toho monsters in all the world. This one introduces... This is the first time Godzilla and Kong got into a fight in like more than a decade. The first time Godzilla and Kong went toe to toe was in 1962. So here's the thing when it was released in the theaters. Well, when I sadly saw it when I was on HBO Max. Well, Max right now. But it was during the pandemic. It got pushed back a couple of times, and they finally released it in some theaters, while it also got released on HBO Max at the time. And I was pissed that it was only on HBO Max at the time before I got HBO Max. But then when we finally got HBO Max, we ended up watching it. And it was so awesome to finally see Godzilla and Kong go head-to-head again. And it got released in 2021 as the time during the pandemic as it got pushed back a couple of times. And things got fucked up, and it almost halted production a couple of times. So here's the thing about the movie: kind of focused more on Kong more than Godzilla. But Kong ends up, and Kong himself looks very amazing, which is what he looks like right here. It also, and it's what they look like going head to head with each other. And the Kong story began with Kong Skull Island, where this depiction of Kong is a little older. And they had moments where Kong has been humanized, where you've seen scratching his ass and taking a shower in a waterfall. But it turns out he was being contained inside of a government, inside of some kind of government enclosure, which simulates his habitat, his natural habitat. And he's also friends with this girl who is a mute, but can understand sign language. And he communicates with Kong. And then there's a moment where Kong ends up... And then there was a moment where Kong ends up going through being chained up on the boat, which almost seems similar to the original, but more modern. But then, suddenly, one thing is which is actually grounded in reality, is that Kong senses Godzilla. That he sensed Godzilla. And the fight between Godzilla and Kong got really amazing. And they actually made this fight between Godzilla and Kong better than the original. They actually made Kong They actually made Kong a little fight better than the original. And he actually fights better. Made him actually fight well against Godzilla without having powers. Kind of like how Batman fought well against Superman without having any powers. I mean, they acknowledge how gorillas are thinking animals, and they fight well against their natural enemies. And one thing that's also accurate is that Kong had a hard time swimming. He can't swim. And then there was a moment where Kong ends up going to this underground earth called Hollow Earth, and then he gets into a fight with these flying cobra-looking things, and they were awesome-looking designs of monsters. And he finds a throne room right here, and there's a roar that Kong made, and it actually sounded similar to the 1976 roar. And then he finds a Godzilla's dorsal fin. He puts it on a stick and made an axe. He made a battle axe for when he makes his next fight against Kong. And then Godzilla and Kong go head-to-head again in Tokyo. And Godzilla and Kong fight again, and then Godzilla dominates. And then Godzilla dominates Kong. And they had a roar off, knowing that Kong doesn't go down, wouldn't back down, being that he's the king of Skull Island, while Godzilla's king of the monsters. But turns out the bad guys from King of the Monsters, and it turns out that in King of the Monsters, the bad guys had King Ghidorah's skull, what's left of King Ghidorah's head, and they used it to build Mechagodzilla. They used the skull, used it to build Mechagodzilla, which kind of weird in a way. But the problem is, he's like Venom from Spider-Man 3, shoehorned into the story. But it's also they also based this Mechagodzilla almost like the combination of 1974, the Heisei, and the Millennium Godzilla. The Showa series is where it was built by the bad guys, and Millennium series because they actually used King Ghidorah's skull and used it to build Mechagodzilla. And instead of being possessed by the spirit of the original Godzilla, Mechagodzilla is actually possessed by the spirit of King Ghidorah. He remembers that he's King Ghidorah and went after Godzilla. Then Godzilla fights Mechagodzilla, and my God, Mechagodzilla gave Godzilla a hard time while fighting, and Kong ends up getting healed with electricity, which is a bit of a nod to the 1962 King Kong vs. Godzilla, where Kong gets stronger by electricity. And then Godzilla and Kong team up against Mechagodzilla, and they ended it where they made a truce where they just destroyed Mechagodzilla, and Mechagodzilla's defeated. And that's pretty much the end of that. And that's pretty much the end of that battle. And then Godzilla and Kong decided to go their separate ways, and Kong went back to Hollow Earth. And that's pretty much the end of that. So it still kind of left people debating on who really won the fight, kind of like the original did. But I feel that in reality Godzilla would have won against Kong. I feel Godzilla would have won. In reality, Godzilla would have won against Kong. That's pretty much why. But Mechagodzilla was just shoehorned into the story. But nice, awesome design of Mechagodzilla, though. It has an awesome design where he made him look a lot like a robot and not a rubber suit. And it has awesome design. But I wish that he wasn't forced into the film. But it's still cool that he's in there. But it was kind of weird how he's possessed by the spirit of King Ghidorah. But other than that, it's a great entry to the series. This is one of the best crossovers. I truly recommend. And tell me in the comments down below of this movie, are you Team Godzilla or Team Kong? Team Godzilla here. So that's all I have to say, folks. And as always, stay awesome at Monster Masters, and I'll catch you later. Next, I'll be reviewing Godzilla -1. Releasing in the U.S. theaters December 1st. And stay tuned for my review on that movie. Bye!